let's keep going with this conversation. I feel like Chase just wants to stir up the pot between me and MD today. So let's see what happens. Chase, you're live on Talk. I almost said Talk Heathen, and I said that because Chase, I just talked to you on Talk Heathen on Sunday, but now here you are calling Truth Wanted. Chase, what's going on?
Hey, fellas, nice to see you. Thanks for taking my call. I'm a big fan of the show and both of you.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Chase. What do you got for us today?
So, so this time I'd like to talk about the health benefits of a plant based diet. And I got to preface that I am no doctor, I am no dietitian or nutritionist. I'm just some dude on the internet. I'm actually an activist for human rights and animal rights. And so, one of the projects that I spent over a year working on was compiling a list of scientific peer-reviewed journals and articles about the benefits of a plant-based diet and the negative effects of consuming meat and dairy and eggs. And I've come up with this Google document called 300 Vegan Health Sources that I'd love to share with MD Aware and get his thoughts on it. Maybe we could do that. I don't know if you have an email or after the show in the Discord channel.
I have an email. Anyone can email me. Let me find it. It's
I'll say this.
mdaware at atheist-community.org.
There you go. And you can always email the show. It's truth at atheist-community.org. And that also gets to MD Aware and also to me and everybody else that does the Truth Wanted show. But Chase, before you do this, I just need to know, please tell me you're about to just read off a Google document of just like sources or whatever.
And also, please don't tell me that you're asking me to review 300
Yeah.
peer-reviewed papers.
Yeah. I want to have a conversation. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want this to just be like, here's the list of articles I found. You know, like, I think that's great that you're doing that research. Obviously, I support that. But
how about this, Chase? You have obviously or hopefully read these papers. What are your conclusions?
Yeah.
And like, what's the so what that you want to share with us?
Let's take it from there. Yeah. I think that's a more interesting way to go. Yeah.
Sure, and I don't mean to overwhelm you and stuff. I know it's a long document. I don't expect you to read the whole thing, but it's categorized, and you can take a glance and see if it's something. If there's a certain area like the cancer part where I've got like 60 links to an excerpt from each scientific study, like from the results or the conclusion or the abstract, and then a link to the article, and then and so there's like 60 of these links for cancer, and then like 50 for heart disease and stuff like this. And then the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics saying that vegans have a reduced risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes and cancer, and that go ahead.
Chase, hit me with your conclusions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that vegans have a reduced risk of heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and that a vegan diet is healthy for all stages of the life cycle, from pregnancy to infancy to childhood to athletes and elderly.
Okay. All right. There's a conclusion. I definitely have thoughts. I think I'm a non-expert as well, Chase, and I've had to kind of look things on my own. I think there are benefits to a vegan diet. And there are benefits to a lot of different kinds of diets. I don't think there's one singular diet that's going to be perfect unless we somehow figured out the exact nutritional deficits that every single person has, and we categorize diets that way. But even then, we have to figure out what does it mean to have a deficit for one person versus another person, right? We all metabolize things differently. So, when it comes to the vegan stuff, obviously I'm a vegan. But I have issues with other vegans, and not you, Chase, but vegans who are like, oh, being vegan is like the most amazing thing ever, and there's like no downsides whatsoever, because there are. You have to take into account certain things. B12 is the most notorious, right? If you do take B12 supplements, you're fine, most usually, right? But vegans noticeably have less B12 because B12 gets, knocked off whenever you're washing foods and stuff, right? But there are definitely some benefits. I definitely agree with you. For example, like I don't think it's too controversial to say that there's a link between excessive meat consumption and rates of cancer. I think that there's a lot of people that are figuring out stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely some health benefits there. I don't know. And I do think that a vegan diet, again, when you consider when it's a very controlled vegan diet, and when I say that, I mean making sure you're hitting your macros, making sure you're hitting, your basic nutrients and stuff. I do think it's healthy at any stage in life. I really do. I don't see anything else that's to the contrary of that. So you're not going to find a fighter in me. I'm curious if MD agrees with that.
Yeah, I mean, I generally think that that's true. I think that everything Dan said is true, that there's always exceptions and nuances. And, from a perspective of like a scientist and someone who's done some studying with respect to nutrition, doing studies on nutrition is extremely difficult in practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that like it's not the same as doing a study on a drug where you have an identical, like molecularly identical form of a drug that you give people to take, and they take the identical form of the drug every day for whatever, a year, and you measure outcomes, right? The diet that people take varies. Like within a vegan diet, no one is going to be compliant with a strict diet, and studies don't even try. They say, they might say, try to eat a vegan diet or don't eat any meat for the next 4 months, but you don't know how well people are following that, and you don't know what they are eating. If you're telling them don't eat meat or meat products or whatever else. So there's like some practical aspects of the actual science that I think are very challenging, and that I think nutrition scientists have struggled with and continue to struggle with. The other thing is that the outcomes are so long-term that it makes it also very difficult to study. With all that said, I agree, rates of there's clearly a link between cancers, different types of cancers, and consuming meat. There's clearly links between consuming, other dairy products and cancer and heart disease. Sure, all of those things I agree. It's also been more of a focus. I think that if you zeroed in on a diet that was overly reliant on any particular food, you would find problems with it. And I think ultimately what people should be focusing on from a health perspective is having a more varied diet, because really I think the problem is that people probably in our society, in our culture, are eating more meat than they should. Maybe they don't need to eat zero meat, but they should have a more balanced diet. They should be eating more vegetables, more varied vegetables, more fruits, more grains, all of these things. But and I learned a bit about our Indigenous population in Canada and their struggles with nutrition and their struggles with diabetes as a result of adopting a Western diet, where I think that there is maybe an underappreciation of and I hate to use this term because I think it's loaded with wooey bullshit, but what are we naturally supposed to be eating? What diet did humans evolve to eat? And I think that varies based on your racial heritage or your ancestry, and that affects what sort of food you should be eating. So there is something to say that a single diet type is not going to be consistent across the entire human race. But certainly I think people should be eating less meat than most people do now. Okay. This is a very typical scientific / medical answer of, it depends. There's all these nuances and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate your thoughts on it. And maybe in the after show I can show you these this document that's got some pretty strong studies, as far as like meta-analysis and randomized control trials and prospective cohort studies. But again, I'm not the smartest on this. It would be nice if we had a dietitian call in, somebody who's like an expert in this field, but in the meantime, you got to deal with me. But I guess the last thing I'll say is, there's a movie on Netflix about plant-based athletes called Game Changers, which is pretty cool. It's all about marathon runners and bodybuilders and martial artists and stuff who adopt a plant-based diet or who have been on it for a significant amount of time and how they're performing really well. It's cool. So Game Changers on Netflix.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. Appreciate you calling in, and thanks for the topic of discussion.